5 years had passed since Christina published her tragic life story. In those years, her publisher did not sell more than 200 books, most of them in the first 2 years. 90% of the sales was entirely due to the work done by Christina and her husband, with most of them being donations or gifts. 2 years after its issue, the book sales dwindled to 2 or 3 copies in a year. In the 5th year, book sales hit 0 copies. With that, Christina and Michael promptly forgot about the book and began to live their lives with their 2 lovely daughters, Aphrodite and Ifat. Shortly after receiving the sales statement, which documented the 0 sales of her book, Christina received a letter from a movie director in Hollywood. The director had read her life story and was thinking of making it into a movie. At first, Christina thought that her publisher would object to her selling her story as a movie script, since she was under contract. Michael had read the publisher's contract that his wife had signed more than 5 years ago. He remembered that one of the contract's clauses maintained that the author retained the right to convert his book into a movie or sell it as a video or an audio. And with that, a dead hope was resurrected and revived for Christina. It had not occurred to her that the story could be documented as a film. She recollected that her Hindu mother was interested to make a movie out of the story of Ifat Khan, but the Muslim terrorists in India put an end to that idea. After her sad separation from her Hindu mother, Christina had totally forgotten about her failed Bollywood project. The unexpected letter opened up a new golden opportunity for the terribly abused Ifat Khan to be not only read in a book, but to be watched live in a movie. She wasted no time in replying the director's query in the positive, and gave her absolute approval for her story to be put on the silver screen. It was not long after when she received a call from the director, inviting her to visit at her office to discuss details around the movie, the contract, and the attendant production issues. It was so happened that Christina's invitation to Hollywood coincided with another personal milestone of hers, her anniversary with Michael. It was no surprise then, that she decided the whole family would celebrate their anniversary in Los Angeles, California. After meeting the director and signing the contract, Christina came to know that it was nothing short of a miracle that her book fell in the hands of an Anglo-Indian woman married to an American. Anglo-Indians have Indian and British ancestry. The director's maiden name was Rita Payton, but changed it to Rita Smith after she married her American boyfriend, Brown Smith. Rita had never been to India, but her mother came from the state of Gujarat and her father was British. She was born in London, UK. She fell in love with an American man, married him, and moved back with him to Los Angeles. Rita Smith first heard about Aphrodite Krishna Khan, Christina Lewinsky, during her crowning at Miss World in 1999 and when she announced her controversial statement about Prophet Muhammad. The combination of her hybrid name, which hinted at 3 different religions, Aphrodite is Christian or Western, Krishna being traditional Hindu, and Khan being Muslim or Oriental, is an odd combination, to say the least. It is easier to believe in the claims of one who professes to follow God, Satan, and the Antichrist than to believe in someone has Krishna and Khan in his name. Her daring comments on the Prophet of Islam held Rita's attention for a long while. She started researching the Miss World pageant. She searched her name in the internet and discovered many things about her. She learned about her 10 years of abusive marriage to an old Saudi and her kidnap by the Bollywood film director Mahmood Khan. Ever since, Rita Smith was trying to get hold of her and discuss the possibility of doing her life story. It seemed obvious that as a result of her inflammatory statements about Prophet Muhammad and the unrest that followed, combined with the plot to murder her, Aphrodite had gone incognito. As if she traveled to another planet in faraway galaxy and vanished from public view. Her internet searches yielded no further result. As if the Indian Miss World, Aphrodite Krishna Khan became a non-entity. Rita Smith, coming to Wall, dropped the idea. One particular Sunday morning, an Indian immigrant came to fix the doghouse in the Smith residence. Rita Smith always liked to talk to immigrants from India. That Sunday when the immigrant worker was repairing her dog's house, she began to talk to him about India and how women were treated in that culture. The topic deviated from Indian women and the two began to talk about the treatment of women in the Third World and in particular Muslim countries. Suddenly Rita remembered the tragic story of the former Miss World, Aphrodite Krishna Khan, and referred to it to support her argument about the oppression of women. The handyman stopped his work, laid down his tools and turned to face her. He admitted knowing the woman in question and had recently read her book which was given to him. He added that Aphrodite was now known as Christina Lewinsky after her marriage to an American. He also related that she lived in the States with her husband and her 2 daughters. With a faraway look in his eyes, he admitted wondering how a book centered around the life of an Indian slum girl came to be written by a girl called Christina Lewinsky. The Indian immigrant rambled on sarcastically, that Indian slum girl, if we can believe her report, has changed her name and religion 100 times in the book. She was born as a Muslim bearing the name Ifat Khan, then she married an Arab man and changed her name to Ifat Ahmed, lie number 1, then she became an Indian film actress and changed her name to Aphrodite Khan, after which she was adopted by a Hindu family and changed her name to Aphrodite Krishna Khan, then she became a Hindu and changed her name to Amrita Khan, lie number 2, then she married a Hindu and became Pooja Patel, then she married a Muslim man and returned to Islam and went by the name Fatima Khan, big lie number 3, then she married an Indian Christian and became a Christian like him, lie number 4, and changed her name to Cristina Fernandez, and then she fell in love with an American and left her Indian husband, and married him and became Christina Lewinsky. That Indian woman like a chameleon, which keeps changing her color everywhere she goes. In fact, she changes her men like we change clothes. Rita Smith ignored the sarcasm because she knew he was Muslim and as such had much trouble with the author renouncing her faith. As soon as she heard about the book, she decided she had to get a copy. After many fruitless visits to the regular bookstores in LA, she started to search for it online and finally found a copy on Amazon.com. When she received a copy of it through the mail, she began to read it, entranced to the point that she could not put it down. She had never been so emotionally affected by any other story she had heard or read in her life. She never expected to discover the magnitude of evil that men were capable of and became determined to bring the story to the world as it is. Completing her reading of The Child Bride and The Old Man of Arabia, she began her hunt for its author. There was no phone number or address of the author. At first, she contacted the publisher, but ran afoul of its privacy policy, which forbade disclosure of personal details. Changing direction, Rita used online phone book and began to search for Christina Lewinsky. Luckily, there weren't many women in the phone book with that name. Then, she wrote a letter to each one of them and stated her purpose of writing to her. In her letter, she requested the addressee to disregard her letter and not to reply to her if she wasn't the author of the book she was looking for. Thankfully, one of the Christina Lewinskys replied. Christina Lewinsky was asked to co-produce the movie. She also was cast into the role of Ifat's mother, Rehana Khan. At first, the director wanted to give the leading role of her film to Christina's first daughter, Ifat Khan. Christina's older daughter didn't look like a vernacular Indian because of her father's genes. Her greatest drawback was the fact that Ifat Khan spoke only English. So, the director began her search for an Indian child who could speak fluent Urdu and Hindi. She was hopeful that the incumbent would also be able to speak some Persian and English. The second leading role in the movie was that of the old Saudi man, Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed. The director knew that she could easily find an old Arab in the States to act that role. The other roles also could easily be filled in by the East Indian Americans. The second task was to find proper locations which would lend authenticity to the scenes. Rita has no worries that the Indian government would object to shooting parts of the movie in India. The problem would be acting and shooting a movie in Saudi Arabia, Eritrea, and Iran. Those were Muslim countries and by default, would harbor a distinct risk of violence, given the context of the movie. Rita Smith knew full well that many movies were shot off-site, and in different countries, quite successfully. In her mind, scenes in Saudi Arabia would have to be shot in Morocco or Tunisia, Iranian scenes would have to be acted out in Afghanistan, and for Eritrea, she opted for Ethiopia. The second task was converting the story into a movie script. Although not insurmountable, it was still problematic. The book did not give many details about the events and descriptions of the characters. At first, Rita Smith was advised to use her imagination to fill in the lapses and the gaps in the book. Not long after, she changed her mind and conscripted the help of the author in working out the missing details with the help of the scriptwriters. Accordingly, Christina was requested to immerse herself into character and help the scriptwriters shed more light on the events and characters of her life. In working out those details and descriptions, Christina was confronted with her painful and cruel past, which she had tried to avoid all this time. Understandably, it was a very emotional period for her, and her co-workers shared in her tears when she relived her brutal rapes and captivity. In her story, Christina Lewinsky mentioned that her Hindu mother who adopted and took care of her for a while planned to put her story into a movie, but due to the sharp disagreement between mother and daughter, their paths parted permanently. Rita Smith believed that Rani Krishna should be credited with being the pioneer for the idea. She of course, convinced Christina to find her Hindu mother, seek reconciliation, tell her about the movie, and invite her to join in its making. Rita believed that Rani, being a film director from Bollywood, would be a great asset in its production. Rita graciously added that she would not mind making Rani a CO director in her movie. Christina was hesitant to go back to her Hindu mother and seek her help after what she had done to her and her late daughter. As usual, Michael flatly reminded her that as a Christian she had to forgive her Hindu mother. He reminded her that, the Lord Jesus said, "Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you, and persecute you." Matthew 5:44. Christina reluctantly agreed to forgive Rani Krishna. It did not take long for her to locate her Hindu mother. She found her in the same city she had fled from. Rani Krishna responded like the loving father whose prodigal son who had run off with his inheritance and returned home to seek forgiveness and reconciliation. Rani embraced her daughter and wept like a baby upon their meeting. She kissed Christina's head, hands, and feet and begged her to forgive her for what she had done to her. Christina forgave her Hindu mother and requested her to pardon her too for keeping the grudge against her for so long. Goosebumps, chills, and tears of joy flowing from both eyes, mother and daughter. It was a heartwarming reunion for both, and words fail at this point. Rani was ecstatic that her daughter was doing well. She marveled at her loving Christian husband and wonderful family. As Rita Smith anticipated, Rani Krishna contributed greatly to the script. She still had the original score, which she had written out so long ago. The first script was written in Hindi because Rani was planning to make the movie in Mumbai. The first thing the two directors did was to translate the script into English. Then, they compared it to the book. They also matched it with the English script that was still in making. Rita was shocked when she discovered that the Hindi version had many details that neither the book nor the memory of Christina could recollect. It served only to underline the mental trauma Christina had to endure when she was denied by her Muslim mother. The subsequent memory loss also included a major portion of her tragic story. In the Hindi script, Christina's memory was crystal clear and the details vivid. Rita Smith was simply over the moon to have found Rani Krishna in her script. Without the Hindi script, the movie would have missed many important events in the life of Ifat Khan. The two directors, Rita and Rani, along with Christina, travelled together to India and stayed in Mumbai. Rani once again proved her value in the task. She, being the best qualified, was in charge of casting. She painstakingly selected the best actors for the many roles in the movie. Rita originally thought to use East Indians living in America. Rani axed the idea, and convinced her to use authentic native Indians from India. The only two roles that were given to immigrant Indians who were living abroad were those of Uncle Jimmy, Christina's former Muslim lover and husband, Jamal Khan, and Rahul Patel, Christina's former Hindu husband. Rani Krishna volunteered to act out the role of the Hindu woman who adopted Aphrodite Khan. She insisted that her role shouldn't be altered or improved because she was going to act it. She had confessed to Rita that although she was ashamed of what she had done to her adopted daughter, of depriving a mother of her baby and forcing her to marry someone she did not love, she was going to do it as an act of contrition and as payment for her craft. She admitted that her crime was motivated by her perception of the rights and wrongs dictated by the Indian culture of arranged marriages and her irrational bigotry toward Muslims. Rita Smith suggested that they should approach Rahul Patel, seek reconciliation, and invite him to play his role in the movie. Rani Krishna was against the idea, but she agreed to give it a shot. She told Rita that her nephew was an arrogant man and acting his role out in a movie was akin to admitting his crime and asking for forgiveness. When approached in his U.S. home, Dr. Rahul Patel greeted them with his subservient, maidservant Hindu wife, mother to his 5 children. As Rani anticipated, Dr. Patel strongly rejected the role and claimed that he was innocent of the charge that he was jailed for. With mixed feelings, Rita turned away, looking for an East Indian to play the role instead. The most difficult task that faced the makers of the film was to find a 7-year-old Indian girl to act the difficult role of Ifat Khan. This role would place the actress in scenes featuring kidnap, imprisonment and rape by an old Saudi. In Bollywood, a scene exposing a child to a rape and kidnap scene would probably be allowed, as opposed to the sensitivities in Hollywood. Rita discussed the serious problem with some experts in Hollywood. Those experts told her that she wouldn't face any legal charge or moral issue in making an underage Indian girl to act the role because the story had to do with a culture that allows female children to get married before they reach puberty. As soon as she got her okay from her compliance, Rita and Rani turned every stone looking for a 7-year-old Indian girl. In 6 months, every role was filled. For the old Saudi man they found an Iraqi man who fled from Baghdad during the reign of terror by the tyrant, Saddam Hussein, and made Bombay his exile. He was a hairy man over 70 and was a perfect match for the role. They also found an 18-year-old Indian girl to willing fill the role of Ifat Khan at the point in her life when she returned to Mumbai and was kidnapped by the late Mahmud Khan. The girl who won the lead role happened to be the reigning current Miss India, who was, needless to say, extremely beautiful and fit the role of Aphrodite Krishna Khan to a T. After all the characters were carefully selected, Rita Smith began to deepen her research for the host countries for her shoots. This task turned out to be the most difficult task of all. Every Arab country she contacted rejected her flat out, even the so-called secular countries such as Tunisia and Morocco. There was simply no possibility of shooting a movie that dealt with the abuse of female children in Muslim society. Some countries accused her of trying to spoil the beautiful name of Islam, the so-called religion of peace, and distort the ideal image of the master of creation, the Prophet Muhammad. They also told her that Islam, among all religions of the world, has honored the woman and put her in the highest status far above all other women of the world. They argued that the woman in the West is used as a commodity for sale as a nude model, half-naked film actress, bare naked in porno videos, she appears nude in musical video clips, displays her body on beaches in a shameful bikini, dances in nightclubs and bars as a stripper, topless, and semi-naked, while the Muslim woman is covered from head to toe and kept most of the time inside her house and can't step out without her husband or a muharram. The Muslim woman is strictly forbidden from sleeping with any man until she gets married. She will be slain in honor killing or gets stoned to death for committing adultery with a man who is not her husband. While the Western woman can sleep with her boyfriend or any other man and becomes impregnated before marriage without any fatal consequences. The Muslim woman can only marry a man and both live as husband and wife, while the Western woman can marry another woman and the two live together as lesbians. Rita was told that the story she was trying to convert into a Hollywood motion picture was the work of fiction and had nothing to do with reality. They said to her further that anyone could write a book and claim to be a true story. How they could verify whether the child bride and the old man of Arabia was fiction or otherwise. They argued further that due to the current terrorist activities of the Islamic Caliphate State, ISIS, in Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Europe, Islam incurred many enemies in the West. Those enemies are working with the Zionist State of Israel, the imperialist America, the communist Russia, and the atheist Europe and trying to destroy Islam and Muslims. They are bombarding on daily basis Syrian, Iraqi, Libyan, Afghani, and Pakistani Muslims and indiscriminately killing thousands of innocent children, women and men, old and young. Nevertheless, Islam and its followers are stronger than their bitter enemies, the Jews and Christians. Allah has begun to defeat them and raised great Islamic troops of jihad in Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, Nigeria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Europe. In the past, Muslim mujahideen hid in the caves of Tora Bora and attacking the enemies like invisible fighters via their suicide missions. But today, the Mujahideen of Allah openly carry the black banners of Islam and fight face to face with the enemies of Allah and their supporters despite the cowardly and hypocritical Muslims in the background. The lions of jihad and soldiers of Allah are openly carrying attacks against the infidel crusaders in Europe through suicidal missions, shooting them by machine guns, stabbing and beheading them by knives and daggers, and ramming trucks in beaches and other crowded areas and killing many infidels' men, women, and their children. Not surprisingly, many Muslim countries harbored serious misgivings on the authenticity of Ifat Khan's life story. Armenia, Ukraine, and Ethiopia were agreeable to filming on their soil. So shootings planned for Saudi Arabia would have to be shot in Armenia, with Ethiopia in the place of Eritrea, and Ukraine replacing Iran. The Indian government gave Rita Smith permission to craft her movie in any part of the country. Sets were planned in Mumbai, Hyderabad, New Delhi, Goa, Mangalore, Shimla, etc. Likewise, the cities of London, Paris, Zurich, Berlin, Cambridge in Massachusetts, Los Angeles, and other western cities where the fate of Ifat Khan had taken her, gave their official authorization to shoot. Now that all the characters were cast and locations verified, the making of the movie began. It took Rita Smith and her CO director Ronnie Krishna, and producers 19 months to give life to the tragic life story of the innocent Indian slum girl, Ifat Khan.